Hello, welcome back to AP Psychology. My name is Mrs. Seguin. Today we are covering Unit 1.3. We're talking about psychological research methods. Now this is a two-part section, so it'll be 1.3 and 1.4. Today we're going to cover the first half. Alright, learning objectives for today. We're going to differentiate types of research with regards to purpose, strengths, and weaknesses. And then we're going to discuss the value of reliance on operational definitions and measurement in behavioral research. All right, types of psychological research. So there's multiple different kinds of research. They all serve a different purpose. So we have experiments, which you're probably most aware of. We have what's called correlational studies, survey research, naturalistic observations, case studies, longitudinal studies, and cross-sectional studies. And I know that seems like a lot, but it will make more sense as we keep going. Okay, experiments. Again, this is probably the one that you're the most familiar with. The purpose of an experiment is to manipulate variables to discover their effects. So it's a very controlled environment, very scientific environment. You are trying to determine cause and effect. The strengths of an experiment. It specifies cause and effect. The variables are controlled. So each of these types of research, they're not good or bad, they have a different purpose. And so if you're trying to discover cause and effect, you use an experiment. The weaknesses are that it's sometimes not feasible. It's sometimes very difficult to do an experiment. The results may not generalize to other contexts, so it may work in this context but not in this context. And it's generally not ethical to manipulate certain variables. For example, we had the little Albert experiment. It's not ethical to traumatize a little boy about a white rat, even if we discover a huge behaviorism, big theory thing. Great, but you've now traumatized a 6-year-old. Correlational studies, their purpose is to associate different factors or variables. So anything that contributes to a result. Basically, when you're looking at a correlational study, you're not trying to determine cause and effect. As a matter of fact, I want you to burn this phrase into your mind. Correlation does not equal causation. Okay, correlation means two things are related. Causation means one thing caused another thing. Okay? The purpose here is to associate different factors or variables. So are they connected in any way? The strengths here, it works with large groups of data and may be used in situations where an experiment would not be ethical or even possible. The weaknesses of a correlational study, correlation doesn't equal causation. So you haven't specified cause and effect. So the results may or may not be, strong results. All right, survey research. You've probably filled out a number of surveys, including personality surveys. Those are psychological research, by the way. Survey research is used to do less precise research of a broader population to achieve an educated estimate. So we're not trying to determine exactitudes. We're not trying to determine cause and effect. We're trying to get an estimate. The strengths here is it can give a generalized idea of the population. So if you wanted to kind of sort of know what percentage of the population prefers chocolate ice cream over vanilla ice cream, you do a survey. Okay, the weaknesses of survey research, though, are they subject to misinterpretation through wording choices. So I could say that the number of students who failed my class increased by 100% this week. That's great, but last week I only had 1 student failing my class. This week I have 2 students failing my class. That's still a 100% increase, but it's not as dramatic as that makes it feel. The other weakness that survey research tends to have is a sampling bias, which basically means that you may not have every culture, every group represented fully. The key point with survey research is to remember that before accepting survey findings, you need to think critically. Consider the sample. You cannot compensate for an underrepresentative sample by simply adding more people. So an underrepresentative sample is not going to represent the different quirks or the differences between all the different people. And so just throwing more people in the mix does not make an underrepresentative sample a good sample. Okay, naturalistic observation. So the purpose of naturalistic observation is literally to watch and learn. You are watching and recording natural behavior of individuals. The strengths of this is it can illuminate human behavior. You're watching. I mean, how many of you love people watching, right? You look at it, you learn a lot about humans by watching them. The weaknesses of naturalistic observation, though, is it observes without controlling for variables, because you're in a natural environment, And so you have no clue what made so-and-so do what they did. You just know that they did it. We can use naturalistic observation to observe and describe behavior, but not to understand behavior. So again, we can see what they did, we can't determine why using naturalistic observation. Then we come to case studies. The purpose of a case study is to examine one individual or group in depth in hopes of revealing deeper and more universal truths. So basically we hope by studying a case study that we will reveal through studying this one case in depth something that we can generalize a little more. The strengths here, it can reveal some really great possibilities and lead to further research. Weaknesses, however, are that they are underrepresented populations, which can lead us to false conclusions about universals. A good quote from page 40 of your textbook: individual cases can suggest fruitful ideas. What's true to all of us can be glimpsed in any one of us. But to discern the general truths that cover individual cases, we must answer questions with other research methods. So this can't be used alone if you're trying to actually, fully determine something. Longitudinal studies are a type of correlational study in which subjects are observed over long periods of time to examine changes, but they don't manipulate the variables. So think correlational study, but so think you're observing a 2-year-old, but you're going to observe that 2-year-old all the way through high school. And you're going to look for changes and what their environment did. You're not messing with the variables, you're just watching. The strengths here are it allows for unique insights into changes over time, into development. The weaknesses here are that it can be expensive because of the time factor, because it's such a long period of time, and subjects can tend to drop out of the study over time. All right, then we come to cross-sectional studies. The purpose here is to observe a population at a single point in time to determine the characteristics of any given population. So just pick a random moment, observe the population, a large amount of the population, to determine characteristics there. The strengths here is that often characteristics can be observed, and they can provide a look at correlating characteristics within a population. It's also inexpensive and fast to do this research because it's a single point in time. The weaknesses, however, are that you cannot differentiate cause and effect. Cohorts may be similarly impacted based on something not being measured. So the cohort is your group that you're looking at, right? It might be impacted by something that you are not measuring, but you also are unaware of. And then your records may be biased, simply because we're studying people, right? So here I want you to pause. I want you to fill in your notes, make sure you know the purpose, strengths, and weaknesses of each type of research. Now we're going to get into our last learning objective. We're going to discuss the value of relying on operational definitions and measurement in behavioral research. What is an operational definition? That's a big phrase, so you have no clue what that means. Look at page 39 of your textbook. As a check on their biases, this is a quote, by the way. As a check on their biases, psychologists use operational definitions when they report their studies. Sleep deprived, for example, may be defined as X hours less than the person's natural sleep. Unlike dictionary definitions, operational definitions describe concepts with precise procedures or measurements. These exact descriptions will allow anyone to replicate the research. So remember a couple of things. First, human beings have bias. There is nothing you're ever going to be able to do to make all of your bias go away. There is inherent bias that you're not even aware of. Psychologists acknowledge that all humans have a certain level of bias. Bias isn't a bad thing, it just exists. But to combat that bias and maybe reshape their research so that it's not so controlled by their bias, they create what they call operational definitions, which basically means we're going to define sleep deprived not by what I would consider sleep deprived, but by this person normally sleeps 10 hours a night, tonight they got 5 hours. So X hours less than the person's natural sleep. The second really big thing that you need to remember is psychology is a science. And when you're looking at science, scientific experiments have to be both measurable and repeatable. You have to be able to measure them and repeat them. So having exact definitions and exact descriptions allows other people to come back and replicate or repeat your research to make sure that it's valid. All right, I want you to pause here. I want you to fill in the notes. Make sure you understand what makes operational definitions and measurements so important in psychology. This will definitely be on the quiz. Okay, in this lesson you learn to differentiate types of research with regards to purpose, strengths, and weaknesses, and to discuss the value of reliance on operational definitions and measurement in behavioral research. What's next? So tomorrow, again, no homework tomorrow night. Yay! Your activities tomorrow will be doing a type of research application and a value of reliance quick write. The next day, so no homework tomorrow, next day, topic quiz 1.3, please come to class prepared for that. All right, and here is your every video meme. All right, that is all for today. I will see you in class tomorrow.